known. The middle part from Montpellier, that is everything except Strasbourg and Rennes. All the others look like that. It's a slogan cancel with a double ring dater. And the map shows the different places where these cancels were used. There were 6 different ones that were used in Paris. And these were used not consistently beginning in mid-July, but some of them were rather off and on. Some of them, Grenoble, for example, was very difficult to find. They were running their own little fair in 1925 anyway. So this was really the first public appearance of or promotion of the fair. And it turns out that you can fly spec some of these postmarks. The common type, it turns out that there are distinctive features of it, of the slogan, font size, accent shapes, and things like that, that will allow you to distinguish almost every city if you don't have the circular date stamp part of the cancel. That's maybe taking fly specking to an extreme. In addition to the promotional postmarks, there were also special postmarks at the exposition. One of the unusual things about the exposition was that it had a freestanding post office. And if you've ever been to post offices in France, you know that these tend to be, little holes in the wall and not freestanding buildings. And this was quite a marvel to people to have this freestanding post office. There was one of the slogan exposition date stamps that was issued that was used only at the exposition. And this is probably an average example of it. And for some reason, all of the examples I've ever seen, the slogan part of it is very poorly struck. The date stamp part tends to be a little bit more clear. But in addition to the slogan cancel, the machine cancel, there was also a hand stamp, circular hand stamp, and those are much, much more common. There was a little 2-line abbreviation of the exposition that somebody just decided to add to the salvage of this stamp, but that is typically what you see on registry labels. So the origin of the stamps goes back to 1923, when Fernand David proposed that they issue stamps and claimed that their cost would be supported from the budget of the exposition. Please keep that in mind. Promises like that, the eventual outcome. In 1924, there was a proposal made to the Chamber of Deputies, and it was approved in March by the Chamber of Deputies, in April by the Senate, and signed into law May 1st by President Mitterrand. And the denominations that were authorized in this law were those that would conveniently handle the most common types of mail at that time, ranging from 5 to 50 centimes for domestic and UPU letters and printed matter, and then 30 centimes for a UPU postcard. But those turns out that those were rates that were in existence from the 1st of, actually prior to the 1st of April, 1924. And in the middle of the exposition, the rates changed. And so some of the combinations, the usages of stamps become a little more complicated, a little more intricate. It is a very short time period from which these stamps were available for use, because they were all demonetized at the end of 1925. Now, as odd as that may sound, This was the second time that the French government had done something like that. The year before, 1924, the Olympic Games stamps were also demonetized at the end of that calendar year, although they occasionally, show up later, as do some of the Art Deco stamps. But down at the bottom are the ones that were actually issued, 10 centime, 15, two different 25, 45 for the postal card, and two different 75 centime values. So the postal history of these is you have a lot of single usages, and then you have a lot of combinations. So once it was decided that there would be commemorative stamps, so the next thing was to arrive at a design. And there was a design competition. These are the only ones that I have copies of from the design competition. 3 by Edmond Becker, 1 from, and I forget what the first initial stands for, CCAR. These are the CCAR and the Potter decorating vase. Those are the ones that you see most commonly. And the first place in the competition was Becker's design of a Potter decorating a vase. So that became the design then for commemorative stamps for the exposition. The next issue was, and how are we going to print these stamps? And David wanted a very elaborate and expensive recess engraving, printing of them. And there were trials made, the several different colors in recess engraving, and they are absolutely beautiful. Heliogravure, and then typography, which was typical of French stamps in the, actually both the 19th and the first part of the 20th century. Experiments with two-color typography, but they decided to keep it a little simpler and went with two-color. So these are all trial colors and essays, but the two-color was not one that was adopted. That's just a trial color. So the actual color for the stamps, the bicolor stamps, was kind of a garnet red in the center and a purplish brown for the frame. And the stamps were printed in sheets that looked like this on the left, 2 strips of 3 panes each of 25 stamps. And those are what typically ended up in the post office drawer, were the panes of 25 stamps. But they were printed with, these are all flat plate printed. The sheet went in, was printed, it was turned 180 degrees, put back in the press for the other part of it. And this is as they say, a windmill printing. And then they were split apart. This illustration is one that I have contrived. I do have the complete 3-pane sheets for the stamps. And so I just reconstructed what it would have looked like. The green outline reflects where the gum was present on the reverse. And in addition to that, and obviously after they were split in half, then each sheet of 3 was split into the post office drawer panes. But there are markings on each sheet, and these are worthwhile in tracking the printings of the stamps. And again, you see the same kind of thing on the earlier 20th century French stamps. An initial representing the press operator, a date, and then a press number. And in addition to that, you have the typical 2-diamond and arcuate control perforations that we see on some colony stamps and also early 20th century French stamps. Perforating was done by essentially a comb that started at the top of the sheet and marched its way down. There are a few cases where it missed the first row of stamps, and those are kind of fun to encounter. This is one from my collection. And the dotted green lines at left show where the perforations were. So they perforated all the way through the bottom of the sheet, but not at the top of the sheet. The horizontal solid green lines were the cuts for the individual panes for the post office drawers. Okay, so to return to the original design, it was decided to issue this in two different denominations. The 25 centime was the domestic letter rate, 75 centime was the UPU letter rate. And again, the design was by Edmond Becker. The numbers of stamps printed for both of these are not apparent from the documents in the Musée de la Poste, because there was another 25 centime stamp and another 75 centime stamp. So they have the totals for the denomination, but not the individual issues. These were issued on December the 7th, 1924. First day commercial cancel on the example at the bottom. And one of the things in studying a lot of these, I discovered a variety in these Potter stamps. And that is a little ink dot that shows up consistently in about half of the stamps on every pane of 25, right above the R in art. And so I have examples showing the different degree of development. In some cases, the incipient one, you can barely see like a little nub at the top. And then the weak version, that's a little darker. The medium, it actually connects with the R. And then the strong examples are a fairly large, a relatively large dot. This is the only variety that's been found in or reported in the Potter stamps. And it occurs in both the 25 and the 75. So it is something that was particular to the frame, which is identical in both, whereas the vignette and the denomination obviously are different in both. Some other varieties that we see, there used to be one that was in the catalogs. The Potter actually has 3 fingers on the base, but there is one that is produced by a rather insignificant downward or leftward shift of the brick background that covers up one of the fingers. And so that, again, used to be in the catalogs. It is no longer. It should not be in the catalogs. It is a common, just very ever so slightly offset or change in the alignment of the background. Then you have other things that are a little more spectacular, such as this one. This is not one in my collection. This is one that I think it was either Bear or Roumet offered for, I don't know, 25,000 euros, something like that. This is from, the block is actually larger than this, but these two are the most spectacular ones, where a piece of paper got in the way of printing of the brick background. There are perforation varieties. Most commonly, you'll have something with a mispositioned perforation comb like the one on the left. And then I have found a small number of examples that are roughly perforated. So even though all the stamps were demonetized at the end of 1925, in the 1930s, French became increasingly interested in rotary press printing. and they resurrected the Potter stamps from the Art Deco exposition and ran trial printings in 4 different colors, color combinations of those on the Chambon rotary press. And the results really were quite good. The example at the upper right the colors are very much like the original flat plate printing from 1925, but you'll probably recognize the selvage with the diagonal bars. That's something that you only see with rotary press printings. Okay, so we have one nice design that was decided by a juried competition. And then Commissioner General David decides that's not enough. And so he proposes 4 additional designs. Now, these were not done based on a juried competition. Some of these were personal friends of his or acquaintances. And so there was a bit of a scandal about these, but remember, he promised that the profits, the proceeds from the exposition would pay for these. And so the government said, oh, okay, you can have these other stamps. Le Flambeau is one that shows a torch, which we'll look at a little bit. La Pot de Fleur is one, it's a very stylistic pot with flowers. La Femme et la Biche. There is nothing in the archives of the Musée de la Poste that really pinpoints what this design looked like. And I rather suspect it is something, should perhaps be something like the Robert Bonfils poster stamp that was issued for the exposition, which does show a woman and a deer. And, but there's, I have no proof of that. It's there. It has the 2 elements of it, but unfortunately, the archives, other than listing the name of it, doesn't go beyond that in terms of what it might have looked like. And then architecture was the other one. So we'll look at these. The Pot de Fleur was a 2-color. In some cases, the shades of green are almost imperceptibly different. In some cases, they're considerably different. These exist in only generally green shades of trial color proofs. I do have the maquette for a possible 25 centime value that was blue and green. These were issued on April 29th, which was during the early part of the fair. They were, like the others, were demonetized on December 31st. And there's some varieties on this, principally perforation varieties. One of the most amusing one is the one where the perforation shift cuts off the 1 of 15. And have a cover where which might very well be contrived, but one of these Misperfs where the flower pot looks like it's a 5 centime, and the domestic rate at that time was 25. And so you look at this and it says, well, is this just 15 centimes? Okay, well, we're going to hit it with double the postage due with a 20 centime postage due stamp. And again, I'm not 100% convinced. I mean, these are authentic stamps and these are authentic postmarks, but I rather suspect this might be something that an enterprising collector, put these stamps on, went to the post office, asked for the postage due, had them all canceled there at the exposition. There are other examples of paper or perforation misalignment, and these also do exist in perfect. The architecture design actually shows a building, a couple of buildings identifiable from the exposition. Initially, the photographic maquettes that I have general buildings in the background, they have workers in the foreground, and it says l'architecture. Later in the trial color proofs that I have, which came in all kinds of bizarre color shades, the design is quite a bit different. The garlands over the tablets are much more detailed than in the maquette. And then we have this prominent building in the background. There were 4 of these towers that were created representing the main wine regions of France, and they had restaurants in them. Those were the highest buildings at the exposition. There was an essay for a 75 centime value for this, and with everything else is like, and including the inscription, but the final stamp for some reason ended up with a blank tablet at the bottom. So for whatever reason, again, issued on 11th of June, although this is one that I have that's postmarked on the 10th, which could be an error in changing the date stamp, or could actually be done the day before. Varieties, not much to say about varieties in terms of ink registration. The one that I've noticed most distinctly is the location of the large urn. Is it on the first step or is it on the platform? But that I have not found anything consistent related to that in all the sheets of stamps that I've looked at. And then, here's a case where you have a little bit of misperforation because of a paper fold. So the postcard, or the postal card, also had the architecture design, and not very many of them were printed. At the time they were issued in late June, 45 centimes was the international postcard rate. But July 16th was when the international postcard rate went up to 60 centimes. And I have found only one example correctly used to a international destination between the 27th of June and the 16th of July. There are a lot of them out there that have an additional 15 centime stamp added to them to make the 60 centime rate, but I have only ever found one. The top part of it is shown here below on the 29th of June, 2 days after the card was issued. And this one is posted to Magalong, Java, and has all of the Dutch East Indies transit receiving marks on it. So that's one of my favorite items in the collection. Nothing really definite in terms of varieties. These are a few that I have recognized, but again, since they're individual cards and not printed in sheets, you can't really compare one to the next. But I have seen, damaged 4s, and then a break in the vertical bar of the 5. Here, the background is shifted over, leaving a white space to the left, but nothing. I don't think anything of any consequence. And the last design, the torch or flambeau, was issued again during the exposition. 2 different denominations, 10 centime and 75 centime. The artist on these was misrepresented for many, many years in catalogs, French catalogs, and in literature. And they kept attributing it to somebody named Schmidt. And I did a big blow up on several of these. And I said, you know, it looks like, you know, F dot L possibly dot SCHMIED, which in fact was a Swiss artist at that time, Francois Louis Schmid. And I published this in the France and Colonies bulletin back, you know, maybe 15 years ago, that this in fact is the designer and not some random person named Schmidt. And since then I've seen that also Schmid recognized in the French literature. So also issued in June, on the June 15th. And there are varieties, not in the 75 centime stamps or printing varieties, but there are in the 10 centimes. And these were reported back in the 1930s in a rather obscure French catalog, which I came across and was able to not only recognize their existence, but also, because I have complete sheets, to recognize the positions in the sheet for each of these. And so you have this should be solid yellow. There's a little white uninked area in it that is consistent. And I can troll through Delcamp and see examples of these occasionally that show these same little errors. There is a line here in the frame, and then a white dot under the A in these particular positions. There are some incidental printing varieties, displaced colors. The broken 5 is not something that I have seen consistently, and similarly with the white dot in the O, in the 0, I have not found that consistently in the sheets and panes that I have. This one is known with a Misper with the top row stamps imperfect on 3 sides. So in addition to the stamps, there was also a collective proof produced, and not very many of these. I was not able to find an exact number. Previously in 1924, there was a much more elaborate collective proof that was produced for the Olympic stamps, and those are exceedingly rare. These are not terribly uncommon. So let's take a little look at postal history, starting with domestic letters. 2 different rates during the period that stamps existed, the original 25 centime rate, and then the July 16th was increased to 30 centimes. And so here we have the 25 centime Potter stamp. Here we have the 25 centime architecture stamp. But this was 4 days after the rate increase. And so it was underpaid by 5 centimes, should have been 30. And they used one of the Art Deco stamps as a postage due to indicate the double deficiency. Foreign letters, the earlier rate prior to July 16th was 75 centimes, UPU rate, and after July 16th, it was 1 franc. And 75 centime stamps are, especially with the Potter, or covers are really fairly common. And with the change in rate, you get into some very unusual combinations to make up the 1 franc. Since there was not a 1 franc, you know, but often you'll have something like, you know, both the 75 and 25 centime Potter stamps to make up the 1 franc rate. Registered, the registration fee for, well, I don't have these marked, prior to July 16th was 65 centimes, and then it increased to 75 centimes for registry. Foreign registry, the registration cost went from 75 centimes prior to July 16th to a franc beginning July 16th. And so prior to July 16th sometimes are relatively prosaic in appearance, but the later ones often are wildly decorated. And the one franc going to 1 franc plus the 75, I'm sorry, the 1 franc after July 16th, this is 1 franc UPU postage plus 1 franc, the new registry rate to Colombia. And this shows, as I mentioned earlier, the hand stamp that they used on registry labels to represent mailing from the Exposition Post Office. Express covers also exist in differing combinations, both domestic and international. And then there's some odd uses of these stamps. You know, they were available for any purpose. But, you know, here's the 75 centimes correctly paid the pneumatic post rate in the Paris pneumatic system. And then here we have a parcel receipt that used the 15 centime pot of flowers stamp on that. Well, at this time, airmail was not in its infancy so much as it was still a novelty. And other than air shows that were common in the early 20th century, there were developing attempts for commercial flights. And so just at the right time, these were experimental flights that were taken to Africa, mainly down the coast to Dakar, and in some cases inland from there. We have one both going to Niger, Zinder, and let's see, where, Niamey. And small numbers of covers were taken with these. The stamps, there's no rate implied by this. You know, there was no airmail surtax for these experimental flights. But the one to Zinder, there are only 20 covers flown from that. And mine unfortunately has a minor crease in it, but I don't care. And then the other one to Niamey, there were about 130 of those that were carried, and typically signed by either the captain or the colonel. But then also during 1925, there developed more consistent commercial airmail between France and its neighbors. And so here in both of these examples, there's a 25 centime air surcharge to Britain and the Netherlands. The one that's really kind of interesting about the one in the lower right, you have the 25 centime paying the airmail rate, but you see the little hand stamp here. These are commercial papers, and so this went at the 15 centime UPU printed matter rate and by airmail. So a little ratty, a little foxed, but one of my favorite covers there. And there are actually quite a few interesting rates at this time going to other European countries, but Belgium probably was the principal destination, maybe secondarily the UK. And as I mentioned, these stamps were officially demonetized at the end of 1925, but they can continue to occasionally pop up on mail. And in some cases, as is shown in these two, the receiving country socked them for postage due. In the one at the upper left, appropriately, the two Art Deco stamps were not canceled. And so that was properly done by the French post office. And then when it arrived in Haarlem, then the Dutch put on 7.5 cents of postage due. The other cover, which is from 1931, this is January 30th, 1926. So perhaps it was an honest mistake by the mailer. But in this one in 1931, 6 years, almost 6 years after demonetization, somebody used not only a block of 4 of 15 centimes, but they threw on a 75 centime. It was not canceled, which was correct. It's only canceled by the Swiss mark on the postage due, but the slogan cancel incorrectly cancels these two stamps. But they made no attempt to hand cancel these or this one, which would have been appropriate. And again, you know, just to kind of tie up some of this at the end, I think they're beautiful stamps. They were innovative, they were colorful. I will say that in the aftermath of the exposition, you know, do World's Fairs ever turn a profit? Almost never. And the same thing was true of the Art Deco exposition. And so then when it came for the time for the French government to collect for the cost of the production of the stamps, there was no money to be had, and there was a lawsuit filed, and the documents on this are in the archive at the Musée de la Poste, and it stretched about 2 years, but there was nothing, you know, the turnip had no blood left in it, and so that was, you know, predictable. I think, you know, predictable, but. A couple of the other interesting things about the exposition, you know, these things are never ready to open when they open. And there are news reports in the French dailies talking about, you know, pavilions that were still under construction and, you know, exhibits that were not done at the time that the exposition opened. Well, although I think these are beautiful stamps, not everybody did at the time. And there was a poem that was published in L'Echo de la Timbrologie on June 30th, 1925. This is after all of the different designs had been created and printed and issued. And here is a translation into English of that. The writer, known only by the initials MJ, took great exception with the quality of these, you know, stamps of the decorative arts. By what mystery art thou then so ugly? Why then art thou so horrible as to raise the taunts of the world? To what mad miscreant do you owe your existent vignettes of low art? Traitors to fatherland, art, and nature, thou art not French. Okay. So that is my little, I will unshare. And would be delighted to answer any questions that you might have. I see there's some things in the chat. I'll take a look at those.
None of that really applies to you, Tom, but
okay.
Thank you very much. And secondly, to remind people, if you have questions, remember to unmute so that we can hear you.
Yep.
I have a question.
Yes, Michelle.
Tom, another fabulous presentation by you. I learn every time I hear another one.
Thank you.
I'm wondering what is either the one that got away or the great white whale you're looking for to add to this collection, and why?
Yeah, so in postal history, there have been some that have gotten away. The number of possible, I mentioned the relatively common uses of them, but there are also frontier rates to, parts of Switzerland and Belgium, and uses to colonies. I would maybe Jim Taylor has seen a cover going to Saint-Pierre and Miquelon, but I don't know. Those, and I have occasionally come across those. And back in the day when I started, everything I was finding was either at a stamp show in the U.S. or on eBay. And then I just discovered Delcom. And that opened up such an enormous world to me for even, inexpensive things that are relatively difficult to find. The one that I showed where the paper had interfered with the printing of the background, I would love to own that. The torch stamps where the perforator missed the first row, there is one top strip of those known for the 25 centime Potter stamp. And that was in a bare net price sale many years ago, but was orders of magnitude out of my my price range. So there are always other little things that that you see that you don't realize. And I'm still studying the slogan postmarks for varieties there to kind of, I'm working on a paper for Francis Colonies Philatelist about that. It might be a little on the dry side, but fly specking postmarks probably is not everybody's cup of tea, but so yeah, those are some of the things. Every now and then I will be at a stamp show and I'll find something in a dealer's stock that is, like a displaced color that they just have it in with their regular stuff, and I'll pick it up for a few bucks. But yeah, thanks.
I have a question. Are there any perfins or overprints on the issue?
There are no overprints, but there are perfins. And I have, I've seen, loose stamps with perfins are not common. But for those, I think I have 2 covers with perfins on them. And, unfortunately, in both cases, there is not like a corner card on the cover at all, let alone one that would match the perfin.
Okay, thanks.
Yep.
I've got a couple for you too.
Sure.
One of them is when they did the rotary trials, did the design stretch out the way they did for the Washington Franklins when they converted the plates from flat to rotary?
Ken, that is a fantastic question, and I should get out my gauge and measure them to see, because that definitely could be, a possibility. And why they chose that to do that experimental rotary printing, is anybody's guess. But they did. I think by that time at 37, they had been printing some of the Sower definitives by rotary press, but this was trying it out on a bicolor stamp.
another miscellaneous question was on the 45-cent postcard. Was the other side always a message, or did they put pictures on some? Or
No, it was always blank on the back, and I have not seen any where, you know, like in the U.S. early postal cards, where sometimes there'd be advertisements printed on the back of the postal card. I have not seen anything like that, and honestly, you know, it's just my unusual, if not very rare card, going to Java 2 days after the card was issued. I bought that at a Yorkshire auction from the UK. I think I paid £12 for it.
congratulations.
Yeah, it's one of these things. Like, and there was no picture of it. It was just like, and that was kind of at the time when I was rather naively collecting, accumulating. So, you know, when it came, I thought, oh, that's cool. And I didn't even realize it until I went to the Musée de la Poste, was reading about it. And then I thought, well, wait a minute, that's the only one I have. But yet there were, you know, about 3 weeks that card was available for use to foreign destinations. But I have a philatelic pen pal in France who collects postcards, and he recently bought my 19th century French postcard collection from Kelleher, but he has never seen one that was used properly in that 3-week period. So,
Tom, that was a wonderful presentation. I enjoyed it immensely. I have a question that perhaps I missed. How did you ever get interested in this subject matter?
oh, you know, Lynn, it was these things. I consider my collecting to be rather impulsive. And back during a time when I was more of a French general collector and was kind of exploring postal history, I bought at, I forget what the auction was. It was an airmail cover with Art Deco stamps going to Lithuania. And I didn't buy it just because I was interested in the stamps, but when it came, I thought, those are really interesting. And I started kind of edging into that. And so again, it's been about 30 years. And so and that's kind of how I have, I know that's, maybe we all do that, but that has kind of been my approach. I wait to be bitten by a bug and start, you know, digging in and exploring and you know, finding out more.
Thanks.
Thank you.
Yeah.
I'm Stan Schulman. I'm new to the group. Thank you for allowing me to participate and listen. Very
welcome.
interesting presentation. And I collect, among other things, Pasteur variants of the big contemporaneous set of
Yes.
Pasteur heads. I didn't see any mixed usages. I imagine there must be lots of mixed usages between the Pasteurs and the Art Deco stamps, but what can you tell me about that?
Yes, and in fact, there are, because, you know, especially after July 16th, when it was kind of a matter of kind of making up rates based on, you know, other stamps. The most common makeup, though, was going from the 25 to the 30 centime. And of course, the low value Pasteur at that time was 10 centimes, but they do show up occasionally. More commonly, they're sewer stamps, the simus, but yeah, occasionally you know, there will be a Pasteur that will show up on that. I think that whole time period, you know, between the wars is just so fascinating before the Depression. Yeah, thank you.
Well, the Pasteurs, one of the interesting things about the Pasteurs is that they look like a definitive set, but they're really the first commemoratives of France, because they commemorate the centenary of Pasteur's birth.
That's right. Yeah, they are. In fact, it's kind of a commemorative that kind of became a definitive as they issued more series of them as the rates changed, and then you had the semi-postals. But yeah, that's yeah, and I keep forgetting. I keep thinking of the Olympic issue being the first commemorative, but you're right. It was the Pasteur in 1923, I think.
Yep.
Was the first. Although some people will claim that the laureated Napoleon stamps commemorated. I think it was the military victory at Jena. But that's kind of a stretch.
Thanks, I enjoyed it.
Thank